Leif Ove Andsnes, welcome back to Pittsburgh. What a joy to have Rachmaninoff's Third with you.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back, and I just had a wonderful rehearsal with the orchestra and Honeck. So there's so many details to work on in this piece, and often neglected details, because people think, oh, Rachmaninoff Concerto, we know this one. But it's actually a complicated piece to put together somehow.
When I walked past the stage, I noticed at the end of rehearsal that you and Maestro Honeck were huddled together looking at a few things in the score. What details were of interest to Maestro Honeck and you?
Well, there's so many transitions in this piece, you know, changing from one tempo to another one. There are balance questions, there are, you know, rhythmical characterization. There's so much. It's an interesting concerto because it's sort of the end of the Romantic era, and at the same time I feel there is the restlessness, something dangerous coming from the 20th century creeping into it. It's different in that way from the famous second concerto of Rachmaninoff, which you could say is a kind of sunset of the Romantic concerto in a way, right? And the third, there's something different going on, and sometimes it can be a little bit confusing, almost like the orchestra is in a different space than the piano, and then they meet, and very interesting piece.
The most difficult of all? It's very tough to play.
That's to be debated whether it's the most difficult. It of course has this reputation because it has more notes than any of the others. At the same time, it's so glorious, the piano writing. You know, I've played it since I was 22, so of course it's a piece you have to live with, because everything has to be so integrated. I've never worked as much on a piece before I played it for the first time in public. I spent 1.5 years on it, and it was needed. I mean, it's there is so much in it, and things just have to happen. And then when I've lived with it for such a long time, it's of course always a challenge, and physically and everything, but it's also comfortable to play because it's so well written for the instrument, and it sounds so beautiful.
What do you think of Rachmaninoff's recording of his own concerto? We do have one, do we not?
We do. We have recordings of him of all the concertos, and I think they are very special. And he has a very personal sense of timing, of what we call rubato in music, give and take, ebb and flow. And he plays fast sometimes. My goodness. Sometimes one feels that he's almost a little embarrassed about the enormous emotion in this in the music that he has created. But I love his playing. It's absolutely fantastic, and I think we should listen more to it. I think some of the modern Rachmaninoff playing today is quite far from how he played it. I think we need to get back to listen to him.
Do I remember correctly, this was written, the Rachmaninoff Third, before the revolution, before he left Russia?
Yeah, and it was written for America, and the story goes that he wrote it and for premiere in New York, and on the boat over, which was a week's trip at the time from Europe to the United States, he had to learn the piece. So he had a silent keyboard in his cabin, and he practiced all the time, because he realized how difficult the concerto he had written. Of course, he knew part of it because he wrote it, but he didn't know it intimately as a pianist. So he practiced intensely on the boat. And then it was first performed in New York, and the second performance of the piece, also in New York, was conducted by Gustav Mahler. And you know, it's one of those events in music history where I would so much have loved to be.
Would have been great to be there, but it's going to be great to hear you and Manfred Honeck this weekend. You're also playing it in Philadelphia and elsewhere.
I am, in 2 weeks. I'm playing it in Philadelphia, and I recorded the concerto in 2009, and after that I actually had 10 years where I didn't touch it. More than 10 years. I came back to it 3 years ago again, and now I'm playing it regularly. And it's like that with some of those big pieces. You need sometimes distance to it as well, and coming back to it, I realize I love it even more.
I hope you love the Pittsburgh performance best of all when it's all said and done. You know I'm biased, of course. Philadelphia's good, but Manfred and the orchestra.
I do love how this orchestra sounds now, and the ability of making different colors and different dynamics, how the orchestra can play really soft and sparkly and everything. It's a joy.
Gary Grafman said he wished he'd learned it when he was young, when he was fearless. Later, of course, he had some trepidation about playing it because the notes are black on the page and all the things that you just mentioned. It's quite an Everest for music lovers. Just love it. They sit down and enjoy it, but you have to make it happen. Now, I want to know one other thing. You have a pulse about the way you just stay in the pocket. I don't know if you know this expression, in the pocket. Does it come from golf? Where does it come from? In baseball, it comes from the sports world. You're in the pocket. You're there always. How do you establish that momentum that you have, where you're just always on? You're perfectly with the rhythm at the time.
Well, thank you. I think that it's important for the soloist in this concerto to know also what's happening in the orchestra, and because there are thousands of notes we have to play at the piano, it's easy to get lost rhythmically, to take a little bit time here and to push there, and where it's a little bit easier you can rush, and then you can take time where it's more difficult, and all these kind of things, which then becomes very difficult with the orchestra because you have a conductor trying to keep a pulse and something organic. And so there are places in this concerto where I have to be very careful about not slowing down and not rushing, but really keeping with what the orchestra is doing. It feels like I'm accompanying. There are certainly passages where I'm leading, but there are also places where I'm accompanying them and have to keep in time. So that's part of it, that I really know what the orchestra is doing, and of course having played the piece so much helps the experience. I know where the difficulties are, where the difficult transitions and places where it can go wrong are.
It's an extraordinary talent, and you've got it, Leif Ove Andsnes, so we're delighted to have it here in Pittsburgh. I want to know other things you've been up to. A 37 CD box set. Warner Classics has released all of your EMI recordings in a single place. Wow.
Makes me feel very old. But I was astounded to hear that my previous record company, Warner Classics, which they bought all the rights to Virgin Classics and EMI Classics that I recorded for previously, and this CD box is from my 20 years with those two companies, from 1990 to 2010, and yes, 36 CDs. That's quite a lot.
Any that you would particularly find pleasure pulling out and listening to? Again, often you can't go back and you don't have time to go back and listen to things, but there must be some that you had under special circumstances or just loved particularly.
Some of those recordings, of course, were bigger projects for me than others. I mean, I recorded all the Rachmaninoff concertos, but being in Pittsburgh, I'm maybe especially thinking of the Grieg and Schumann concertos, which I did with Marius Jansons in 2002 in Berlin, and I think it was the first time I was in Pittsburgh. I played the Schumann concerto with him here. That was a few years before that, and it was incredible to see what Marius put into that recording. We recorded the Schumann live with the Berlin Philharmonic over 3 concerts, and then the Grieg, with the Grieg, everything had to happen in one day after the concerts, and I was so anxious about that. Just a session or two. How could we do that big concerto? And so I almost didn't sleep that night before the sessions. And what Marius put into it, the energy and the commitment and the contrasts in the score, so incredible, so touching.
You're out with the Dover Quartet, and that's a new collaboration for you, playing Dochnanyi's piano quintet, correct?
We also played the Brahms quintet, which is more famous, but also Dochnani. And I worked with I actually invited the Dover Quartet to my chamber music festival in Rosendal in Norway. They came in 2018, and they also came last year. I love both of those quintets, and I don't know if you know the Dochnani, but it's a wonderful piece written during the First World War. It's a little bit like Richard Strauss for piano and strings. It's so charming, so well written, and nostalgic piece at the same time, written in the period when it is. And the Brahms Quintet is, of course, one of the great masterpieces of the genre. So that's a tour I'm doing now in between these 2 weeks with Rachmaninoff 3 in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, and I can't wait to see my friends.
And when does Rosendal come around again?
That's every August. This summer we're doing lots of Hungarian music. Liszt, Bartók, Ligeti, Kodály, Kurtág, and things like that. And we also have a few concerts with Johann Sebastian Bach, and actually putting on the St. John Passion, which is has its 300th anniversary this year. So it's going to be a big festival.
Lots of good video with you on YouTube, a Beethoven film, the Mozart Momentum Project. You have some video. What have you loved doing? The multimedia world is all new to an audio guy like me.
Well, I've been lucky for some of the projects to collaborate with really wonderful people who work within TV and so on. And I made a few documentaries for the Norwegian broadcasting company, and we made a documentary about Grieg, one about the Bergen Philharmonic, which is the orchestra of my hometown, and so it's been interesting to be part of that world and see how one can narrate a story within a program about something. But of course, with me, it always starts with the music and what I can share with the music. And if I can also share it in words and showing examples and so on, I'm very happy about it.
When you recorded pictures at an exhibition, you and your piano disappeared underwater next to an oil rig. It was under unusual circumstances.
Well, that was a very unusual project where I collaborated with the visual artist Robin Rode. So I played a kind of recital, but also with the screen behind the piano where there was video projection, and some people hated it and others really loved it. So it divided, I guess, also between generations, and the younger generations found it easier to cope with listening and looking at the same time.
So what was the concept there?
The concept started with the Mussorgsky pictures at an exhibition, which are 15 pieces, and Robin Rode made 15 films for very different ones for each of the movements, and then so it was a sort of, it was a multimedia experience. And of course the Mussorgsky is very strong in itself as music, so for some audience members I think it was, they felt the music is enough, and for others they felt enhanced by the visual elements. It's very fascinating films he made.
I wish I could have been there for the pitch when he was saying to you, Mr. Andsnes, and at the end we're going to have the piano underwater.
He said he had the idea that it would be wonderful to kill the piano as, as part of this. And in the Great Gate of Kiev, which is the last movement of the Mussorgsky, which is very massive, very monumental with these big waves of sound, he ended up drowning a piano in a dry dock in Norway. We filled it with water, and you see very close. I mean, it was an old piano. It wasn't my piano. It wasn't a very distinguished piano by that point. But it's quite dramatic to see how a piano actually gets filled seawater and to see how it behaves. And so it became a surreal thing to hear this music with those images.
Oh, what's not to love? It sounds like a riot. Great fun. Oh my, anything else we should know about your recent activities, what you're up to? You've got the Sony label releasing your latest recordings. What should we know?
Oh, I don't know. I just played a big sonata by a Norwegian composer, and I absolutely love the piece. It's written in the, right after the Second World War. His name is Geert Tveit. And 80% of his music was lost in a fire, can you imagine? On his farm in western Norway. But this sonata number 29, which is the only surviving piano sonata, he had already said to his publisher and said that this is my best piece for the instrument, and it really is. It's a mighty piece of half an hour that I've been playing around recitals in Europe, and I'm coming to United States to play it next year. So that's a piece I'm championing at the moment.
I look forward to hearing it, and I hope there's a recording at some point.
There will be a recording. I'm trying to plan one, yeah.
Good. You mentioned Bergen being a city that you love, and of course Grieg and the Grieg Concerto. I noticed you're going to Trondheim. How far is Trondheim from Bergen? I don't have my map.
Well, it would be if you drive, it would take a day. So it's a flight. It's a flight going north a bit, and it's a nice city with a nice orchestra. And my father is originally from that area, so I feel at home there as well.
Oh, do you still have your dad? Is he still with us?
Yes, yeah. I have both my parents. I'm very lucky.
You're very fortunate. That's so great. Call them tonight, please.
Yeah.
Tell them how it goes in Pittsburgh tomorrow night. I'm sure they'll want to know. And Trondheim, where was Grieg born? Is that his birthplace?
He was born in Bergen.
Yeah.
And that's why we feel that he's ours. I live in Bergen, and there is the Grieg Museum in Bergen where he built with his wife this wonderful villa, which at that time was a little bit out on the countryside, but actually now it's just 15 minutes to drive from the center and out to the place. And there's today a small concert hall there, and there's the villa with the piano that he had. That he got to Steinway in 1892 as a present, and it's a very special place.
Must get there. I think Trondheim is also on my list because Monty Python has a skit in which they have a Trondheim hammer dance, and there isn't really such a thing. Have you ever heard it, the Trondheim hammer dance?
I haven't. I've seen some Norwegian things, references by Monty Python, but not that one.
I don't think there is a real hammer dance. It involves wives who discipline their husbands with the hammer, if I remember it correctly. I'm not sure.
I'm sure they still do.
So great to be with you. Good luck this weekend. I look forward to hearing your Rachmaninoff Third, and I hope you'll be back again as soon as possible. And good luck with all of these wonderful things you're doing.
Thanks a lot.